Hello, I'm Brent Brummett, the Executive Director for Student Support Services. Thank you for devoting time today to reviewing Northeast ISD Board Policy FNG Local, Legal, and the accompanying exhibit regarding student-parent complaints and grievances. As administrators, the vast majority of our interactions with students, parents, and the community are positive and supportive. Your skills in communication and conflict resolution typically enable you to successfully resolve issues informally. In rare instances, however, a student or parent may wish to pursue a formal dispute resolution process. This process is outlined in Northeast ISD Board Policy FNG. Familiarity with this process can eliminate many common errors and potential miscommunications. For example, knowing where to locate the policy, what the policy entails, providing complaint forms, understanding the timelines associated with the formal grievance process, and knowing instances in which grievance conferences are not permissible under policy will help you greatly in navigating the FNG process. Northeast ISD Board Policy FNG is the policy that governs the formal resolution of complaints. The goal is always to hear the concern and resolve the issue at the lowest possible administrative level. Although informal conferences are encouraged, they are not required prior to the filing of a formal complaint by a student or parent. Note that there are 4 potential levels of response, with the first always being the principal. Also later in our presentation, we will address scenarios in which the complaint cannot be addressed by board policy under FNG and the alternative action that the principal takes in that scenario. So first, to familiarize yourself and to help you to communicate effectively with potential complainants about the policy, let's look at how you access. Accessing FNG information can be done via the district homepage. Locate the link for About NEISD. That link will take you to a link for the Board of Trustees, which then contains a specific link for board policies, including obviously FNG. Note that FNG contains a specific exhibit, which is the Notice of Complaint form at Level 1 document. This is the only form in which individual Level 1 complaints may be submitted. As an additional reminder prior to our discussion of the procedures at Level 1, please be reminded, if you receive notice of complaint and a request for a Level 1 grievance conference, please be sure that you notify your respective Executive Director for Campus Administration and forward the form to the Executive Director for Student Support Services as indicated prior to scheduling the grievance conference. Now let's take a few moments to focus specifically on Level 1. Policy states that the principal shall hold a conference. There is no option to waive. Even though the principal and the complainant may have met informally, as we alluded to earlier, the complainant may decide that the formal process will provide additional information, introduce a new concern, offer additional witnesses, or provide corroborating evidence. In any event, the burden is placed upon the complainant to detail in writing both what the complaint actually involves, as well as their requested remedy, particularly given that this remedy may not have been introduced informally. The principal is afforded a fair opportunity to investigate and to attempt to solve the problem at the lowest possible level. Grievances are frequently resolved at Level 1 as the parent feels heard during this formal process and recognizes a sincere effort on the part of the principal to collaboratively solve the problem. So in review, the specific steps for FNG Level 1 are as follows. Upon receipt of notice of complaint at Level 1, the principal must hold a conference within 10 school business days of the request. And then following that formal conference, the principal must investigate, review, and respond in writing within 10 school business days. Note that there is no script for a particular response, our Office of Pupil Personnel Services is always available to assist administrators, but your response will entail information that we'll cover in an upcoming slide. An additional reminder, in calculating days, remember the day a document is filed or delivered is day 0, with the following day being day 1. And a day is calculated as concluding at the close of business, which historically is interpreted at the time that central office closes. Note also that all timelines shall be followed unless they are modified by all parties via mutual written consent. So you've received a notice for a level 1. There are 3 questions that you'll address prior to scheduling that level 1 conference. And please note that despite the inability to waive the request for a level 1 grievance conference, there are multiple instances in which a complaint may not be addressed under FNG. Generally, they fall into these 3 categories. First, has the complainant complied with the 10 school business day timeline to which we alluded earlier and provided you notification on the required form? Okay. Secondly, is the complaint addressed by an exception or alternate policy detailed in FNG or excluded altogether? And we will review those exclusions momentarily. Lastly, is the complaint a student-focused issue? So please note that despite the inability to waive the request for a legal conference, okay, we've addressed timeline, we've addressed the potential exclusion under FNG, and we've addressed a verification that you're addressing a student issue. If the answer to any of these questions is no, do not proceed. Be prepared as the principal to provide the parent an explanation as to why the grievance won't be accepted and indicate that a letter will follow describing why the request for a conference is being denied. You may always opt to meet informally as you would proactively to address any potential student or parent concern. As an additional reminder, when determining whether to schedule a level 1 conference to address a complaint or grievance under FNG, please remember to verify in FNG Local if FNG is the appropriate vehicle for that complaint. Remember, there are 21 exclusions, okay, or exception policies listed in FNG Local. The most popular being issues of discrimination are addressed via policy FFH. Concerns via harassment and dating violence should be addressed via policy FFH. Complaints regarding bullying or retaliation related to bullying should be addressed and submitted in accordance with policy FFI. Note also that there is no provision for appealing a student disciplinary consequence administered at the campus level, provided that the campus can document the provision of due process as overseen by the principal as campus behavior coordinator. Likewise, there is no appeals process for a disciplinary alternative education placement that is made by a hearing officer. There is, however, an appeals process for any expulsion of a student from Northeast ISD that is covered under Board Policy FOD. Other frequently occurring issues that are not subject to FNG include the identification, evaluation, and educational placement of a 504 student. These will be submitted in accordance with Board Policy FB and procedural safeguards. Likewise, complaints concerning the identification and evaluation, educational placement, and discipline of a student with a disability shall be submitted in accordance with Board Policies EHBAE, FOF, and the Procedural Safeguards Handbook. Any complaints concerning instructional resources may be submitted in accordance with EF. Again, please refer to Board Policy FNG Local in reviewing the 21 instances in which a student or parent complaint filed under FNG may be accepted, and verify under which policy, if any, a level 1 grievance should be heard. For any concerns or requests, please contact the Office of the Executive Director of Student Support Services. Once you've established that those 3 criteria have been met, let's address the conference format specifically. Establish the ground rules for the conference. Above and beyond expectations for professional decorum, note that there is no specified time limit, and this is not an evidentiary hearing. Your role is to ask clarifying questions that you may need in compiling your subsequent response at level 1. You're welcome to offer any assistance that a complainant might request in completing the form, and you're reminded to be sure that you have requested all available documentation. You might also proactively assume that your conversation is being recorded, and listen with the understanding that you are not obligated to provide any potential resolution during the conference itself. Your obligation is to conduct a thorough investigation and make a determination about what, if any, of the complainant's potential remedies you will provide. As additional reminder, do not hold a conference with an attorney unless we have had the opportunity to consult with our district's counsel. If the parent designates a representative with fewer than 3 days' notice prior to scheduling the conference, you may reschedule to a later date to allow the district to be represented as well. In short, if a parent indicates to you that they will have an attorney representing them as part of the grievance process, call me and we will review the process and how we will support you in that circumstance. Moving on to the Level 1 response letter. This contains several important components that ideally will satisfy the complainant that you have in good faith resolved their concern. First, state the initial concern and complaint objectively as part of your initial response. Be sure to summarize the evidence presented to support the complaint. Review and emphasize what you considered and investigated in response. You will address requested remedies individually and note whether each was granted or denied, noting that it is possible to grant a remedy in part or deny a requested remedy because you do not have the authority to grant the request. Proofread carefully, as you would with any other document, assuming that your response may ultimately be scrutinized by your superintendent, by board members, by any attorneys, and/or by the media. Before submitting your response letter, please review the following checklist. State that the letter constitutes your formal response. Summarize the evidence presented to support the complaint. Review what you considered and investigated in response. Address requested remedies individually and note whether each was granted or denied. Remember that it is possible to grant a remedy in part or deny a requested remedy because you do not have the authority to grant the request. Lastly, it's good practice to close with a positive presupposition. For example, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to investigate your concerns. I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you in the future on your child's behalf. You are, of course, always welcome to submit your response letters to me for review prior to submitting them to the parent. Once you've completed your Level 1 conference, please be reminded of the following documents that you should retain at Level 1. These include your original notice of complaint, copies of all supporting documents provided by the complainant, copies of the supporting documents referenced by the principal in his or her response, principal's letter of response, and documentation demonstrating how and when the complainant received the letter of response within the 10 school business day timeline, i.e. signed certified return receipt request, a copy of an email sent before the close of business on the specific day, or other documentation to substantiate that the complainant received your written response. And again, you are always strongly encouraged to provide the Office of Student Support Services the opportunity to assist you in compiling an appropriate and comprehensive response at level 1. Because of your skill as administrators in working collaboratively with parents in students' best interest, the vast majority of student-parent grievances are successfully resolved at level 1. In those rare instances where a grievant feels that they were denied their requested remedy, they do have the option under existing FNG policy to progress through subsequent levels. Level 2 in particular is why your initial documentation of your efforts at level 1 are particularly important, because these will be submitted as part of the level 2 process. Note that the complainant also must submit all of their documents from level 1, along with a notice of complaint at level 2. The same 10 school business day timelines exist for formal conference and written response. A designated executive director will be assigned to meet with the complainant. In any event, remember the expectation that every level 1 notification is required to be submitted to the Executive Director for Student Support Services, as well as the principal's respective Executive Director for Campus Administration, so that you can be adequately supported. Lastly, be reminded that no new complaints or claims for relief may be raised at level 2, in fairness to the campus administration, except in cases where the principal considered additional documentation at level 1 in connection with the preparation of his or her written response. Again, should the complainant feel that he or she was denied his requested remedies at levels 1 and 2, he or she does have the option of submitting an appeal to level 3. And as on prior levels, the complainant must submit all documents from levels 1 and 2, along with a new notice of complaint at level 3, which we viewed earlier. An important distinction at level 3, as opposed to the initial 2 levels, is that a timeline does not exist for any formal conference or written response. In these scenarios, a designated associate superintendent will be assigned to meet with the complainant to review level 1 and 2 documentation. No new complaints or claims for relief may be raised at level 3, except in cases where the principal considered additional documentation at level 1 in connection with the preparation of the written response, and the parents submitted additional documentation, but only to the extent that such documentation directly responds to what the principal considered at level 1. Lastly, under FNG, a complainant does have the option to submit a formal grievance or notice of complaint to level 4, which involves the superintendent and the Board of Trustees. There are some important distinctions, obviously, with regard to procedures at level 4. Once again, the complainant must submit all documents from level 1, level 2, and level 3, along with a notice of complaint at level 4. In this instance, the superintendent of schools will inform the parent of the date, time, and place of the meeting with the Board of Trustees. In deference to the superintendent and the board's schedule, no timeline exists for the board to hear the complaint. This meeting, unlike at prior levels, is formal, is recorded, and is subject to set time limits. As principal, when and if you are involved in a level 4 grievance, you should be prepared to attend the board meeting, which will generally be closed, but could potentially be conducted publicly. So as a review of the levels contained in Board Policy FNG, persons with whom to file, level 1 is always the home campus principal. At levels 2 and 3, subsequent documents will be filed with the Executive Director for Student Support Services. Any grievance rising to level 4 is filed directly with the Office of the Superintendent. Thank you for devoting time to reviewing the importance of Board Policy FNG today in your ongoing efforts to support students on your campus. Please reach out to my office anytime I can be of support to your students, your administrative team, or you.